Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is James Vitali, and I'm the Executive Officer of the Cambridge Union. We're absolutely delighted that we've been able to put this discussion together. It promises to offer some fascinating insights into sport at Cambridge University. We live in a world of professional sport, where once upon a time, gifted and talented athletes would go to university to pursue their sporting endeavours as students. Very frequently now, they're picked up at an exceptionally early age and put on a fast track towards practicing their respective sports as vocations. But that isn't always the case. And moreover, sportsmen and women from across the world continue to come to Cambridge University to study and to earn a coveted blue in the various varsity fixtures. Why that is, and what going back to study as a professional sports person is like, is the focus of tonight's event. I'm delighted that tonight's panel will be chaired by our friends from the Bluebird, Cambridge's key sports publication. Charlotte Cutter is a second-year geographer, and Nathan Johns is currently studying for an MPhil in classics. They have recently interviewed Louise Shanahan, who is a PhD student at Trinity and an Irish middle distance runner, and also Michael Atherton, former England cricket captain, but far more importantly, the former skipper of the Light Blues. I do urge you to go across to their website and various social media channels and check out their new podcasts. They're really excellent. Without any further ado, I will pass you on to Charlotte and Nathan to introduce our excellent panelists.
Thank you so much, James. It's an absolute pleasure to have you three joining us this evening. And I'll get on to introducing you before we get into the questions. So we have with us this evening Flip van der Merwe. Flip is a retired professional rugby player. He's appeared 36 times for the South African Springboks between 2010 and 2015. He is currently studying for an executive MBA at the Judge Business School. We also have with us James Knoll, who is a two-time gold Olympic rower. In 2019, he became the oldest competitor and also the oldest winner for Cambridge in the boat race against Oxford. He studied for an MPhil in human evolution between 2018 and 2019. Finally, we have James Horwill, who is also a professional rugby player, known as Kev. He was the captain of Australia between 2011 and 2013 and won 66 international caps between 2007 and 2016. He is currently also studying for an executive MBA at the Judge Business School. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining. And it goes without saying, it's a shame that we can't all be in the chamber. It's definitely something that's a real sense of occasion. It's a pretty special place where some pretty historic conversations and debates have been had. Sadly, we're all in our rooms on Zoom. So I'm going to start off just by trying to recreate some of the kind of atmosphere and the emotion of you guys chatting about your first experience playing your top level sport at the highest level, representing your country, which is pretty impressive. So James, tell me, James Cracknell, there's a lot of Jameses here this evening. Tell me about the first time you rowed for Great Britain. What was that like as an experience?
Well, result-wise, wasn't so great, but I just raced the. I won the under-18 World Championships the year before, and then I went straight into the senior team. And going from racing people your own age to suddenly you're racing guys that won at the Olympics and the World Championships, and you're not. Although you're 18, you're not kind of fully grown then, and it's a realization between doing something your age group and then this is what it's like. And I made the choice when I left school to go and train at the rowing club where this guy called Steve Redgrave trained, who was Britain's best rower, won lots of Olympic gold medals at that point. And I figured if I could beat him one day a month and then one day a week and then every day, then I'd have a good chance of getting there. And so I guess it was strange going into a World Championships the previous year being it was first or nothing, and then your aims have gone to make the final, which is not something to aspire to in some ways, but the realization of where I had to go, making the team is one thing, but no one wants to get, as the guys are saying, no one wants to get there just for the kit. You want to get there to win as well. And so it was, chastening is probably what I'd say, rather than loads of fun.
And Flip, am I right in saying you got your first cap in 2010 against France? What was that like as an experience, getting the jersey for the first time?
Exactly. Thank you, Charlotte. It's definitely an experience, and I think, like both Jameses will tell you as well, it's an experience you will never ever forget, and forever want to live in your life again. It was kind of different, as I was seen as a late bloomer in rugby. I wasn't a typical 18, 19-year-old, strutting it off and becoming a star. And I think that experience made it a little bit different. It makes that I appreciate it so much more. It sort of happened very fast. I signed a first professional contract in 2009, and 2010 I was a international player. Especially playing it in Cape Town, where my old man played a lot of rugby. It was a very sentimental feeling, and one I always keep with me. Yeah.
Classic little Zoom faux pas there. And lastly, Kev, onto you. You earn your first Wallabies jersey against Fiji in 2007, if I'm correct. How did that set up the rest of your career in terms of a real high?
Yeah, look, I think it's obviously representing your country's sort of the peak of where you can get to it as a rugby player, and it sort of, I guess, ratifies all the hard work that you put in to get there. But as James touched on, it sort of gives you a taste to want more of it. I didn't want to be the one that had played one test and that was it. You got the jersey, and then you can put that against your name. So it sort of gave me the taste to want to kick on, and I was lucky enough to play a lot more times for my country. But it was certainly a very proud moment, and particularly for the people that helped you get there. My parents, my family have been very supportive, and sacrificed a lot to allow me to pursue what was ultimately my dream, was to play rugby for your country. So I think while the emotion's important for you, I think it's as important for the people that have helped you get there, and that was the nice part for me.
Well, we are here, after all, to talk about professional sport and its relationship to Cambridge, of course. So I'll start with you, James Cracknell, because obviously the three of you are looking at Cambridge from very different perspectives, obviously coming from all over the world and from two different sporting backgrounds. James Cracknell, what was your perception of Cambridge before you came here as a student? With the boat race and being someone from Britain, I'm assuming you were, and definitely as a rower as well, I'm assuming that the tradition behind Cambridge rowing was something that you were very much aware of before you came here.
Yeah, it definitely, it's the way rowing is. Rowing was on telly, once a year, and that was the boat race, or once every 4 years, and that was the Olympics. That was the only time it was on. And so when you start rowing at 13, 14, the chance of your sport on telly is the boat race. Not that it made much sense, but you're kind of aware of it. And then if I'd had the grades to get into Oxford or Cambridge when I left school, I think I probably would have gone there if I could have, just because no other universities didn't really have the strong rowing program for you to do it and then be able to step on internationally. But then once, I suppose, your perception of the race changes when you're in the sort of international setup, that it actually, even though you're the same age as the guys doing it, your objective is boat races in April, your World Championships are in August, September. So it's just very different. It was a kind of add-on to the calendar rather than, I guess, an aspiration. So I think it kind of, from being appealing when I was at school. It went to something else that happened when I was competing internationally. I don't know whether Flip or James will say the same about the varsity match, but it wasn't until probably in the mid-90s when lots of internationals started going back and racing there. A lot of German guys came over and Americans, and it's suddenly okay, right? They used to give us a proper race.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I spoke to Tom Ransley, who gold medaled in the men's 8 in Rio, and he said exactly the same thing, that it was around the 90s that when the Germans came over, that's when he remembered that the boat race really started getting its international pull. So it's interesting you agree with him there. So Flip, you came over from France before, obviously you finished up with Clermont before you came over to do your degree. I'm curious, because at least, James Horwell was based in Quins down in London, so he at least was in the UK. So I'm curious what the South African / French viewpoint of coming to Cambridge and playing sport and studying at Cambridge is.
Yeah, I think the institution as such goes without saying that, I obviously knew about Cambridge. And much as James said, it stays a dream when you're at school. It seems when I went to school and at uni in South Africa, Cambridge did seem very far away. And I was lucky to have family friends that actually attended Cambridge, and they kept that carrot in front of your nose. I was also very lucky to be able to have an education before my rugby career took off. So I knew it was something that was that I was interested in. It's something that I wanted to continue. And it always, when I came to France in 2015, it always was a thing that I wanted to continue after rugby. Is to pursue further education and use education as that springboard into the corporate world or into the professional world. And then as I started looking at different schools to attend, Cambridge just had so many positives going for it, and definitely having the Cambridge Rugby Club there as a support system when you come in is definitely something that helped me make a choice for Cambridge.
You speak a lot about academics there, and I know Charlotte is keen to ask about academics in a moment. But before she does, James Horwell, I quickly want to ask you about the sporting side of things. How aware of the varsity match were you before you came here, and how much of a pull was that structure and playing in a game like that to going to Cambridge?
Yeah, look, I was pretty aware probably from early when I went to university, similar to Flip, when I went to university straight out of school in Brisbane, so the University of Queensland. There was a lot of people that had a strong link to Cambridge there, between that rugby club and that university and Cambridge, and a lot of I guess alumni from guys that I'd played with or guys that were part of that rugby club had been and either played in a varsity match or attended either Cambridge or the other place, and I think that was probably something that was that I knew about and probably planted the seed very early on. And then as I went into my professional career, I was lucky enough to play a couple of years with Dan Vickerman, who came over here and played, an ex-Australian lock who played in the varsity match for 2 years and captained Cambridge here at the university. And then finally to that, I played with Jamie Roberts, who's obviously the British and Irish Lion and Welsh centre at Harlequins, and when he arrived at Harlequins the same time I did, he'd just finished his varsity match experience. So I guess throughout my professional career and before it started, I knew about it and knew the importance and the prestige it held amongst the rugby community, and still does, particularly back in Australia, that's for sure.
Yeah, Nathan touched on it a bit. Obviously, the academic side is probably what people think of most when you talk about Cambridge, and I think it's very easy, particularly something like the boat race when it's on telly every year, and this kind of incredible sense of sporting achievement is put on a pedestal, for people to forget that they are at the end of the day, students doing degrees at a university that prides itself on being very academically rigorous. And James Cracknell, how much of a pull was the kind of academic reputation of Cambridge when you were coming to do a degree like MPhil in human evolution, like you did?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the way I approach it is similar to Flip, of it as actually came here for the course with the aim of it furthering the career work that I'm doing. And in contrast to my undergraduate study, which was my choice of university was proximity to where the rowing team was based. And it involved basically you got 3 years to train and bluff your way through a course. And that was, so if I look back at my undergraduate degree, it was a way to support a career, and I wasted the chance of actually having a degree that I would use in the future. I'm not saying anything against geography, which is my original degree, but my knowledge of glaciers hasn't been that much use since. But so it was actually going back and going to university, doing the course I wanted to do, and then alongside that doing the boat race. And there are also a couple of big personal reasons for doing it, in that I had my sporting career, and then I'd done a couple of sort of adventure endurance type documentaries for the BBC and Discovery Channel, and I got knocked off a bike during one of those, and had a really nasty accident. I was in a coma for a few weeks and suffered a massive head injury. And the perception of what I was able to do afterwards from other people, family, mates, and also my own self-confidence was really down. And actually, I was doubting myself. And yes, people were placing limits on me, but I was also placing them on myself. And the work I was doing in public health and non-communicable disease, lifestyle disease, was actually, the course was really going to add academic credibility to that. And then if I could pass, an MPhil at Cambridge and compete in a boat race, I hadn't rowed for 15 years. I hadn't, last time I was at university, there was no internet. So I was really laying it all out there. And also you have neurologists and everything saying, well, you won't be able to do this. And suddenly the challenges became much more real. And then what you touched on then, the reality of being a student athlete in having your timetable of lectures, and we used to train at 6 in the morning, then lectures, then train again in the afternoon. And that's where the realization, and the guys say as well, when you come from being a full-time athlete, that we did at 6 o'clock in the morning till whatever, 8, and then you'll go to your lectures. And I was used to coming off of the training session, lounging around a bit, getting changed, back around the change room, and then go. And suddenly, within 5 minutes, everyone had gone. And I was sat there going, what's happening here? What are we doing? Because there was something, oh yeah, I've got to go to a lecture and have breakfast before. And we trained out in Ely, so it's a half-hour drive. First couple of times I missed the minibus because I was just busy lounging around upstairs and I was sort of getting a meal ready for us. And then you realise, no, you've got to have made some food beforehand and eat it in the bus on the way home. The only reason I didn't miss the bus later on was that I was the only one old enough to drive the minibus out of all the athletes. So I had the keys at least.
Oh, that's brilliant. Also, it's made my day that your first degree was in geography. I know what to answer to all the colouring in jokes. I'll be like, well, James Cracknell did geography, so
Well, I was a geography teacher as well before we kind of went full time into Olympic stuff, and I'll be out in London, and when we could go to nightclubs, you'd be out at a club, and then someone comes up and goes, "Hello, you used to teach me geography." And I was like, oh, great. First, I feel very old. What do you do now? Not geography, you're shit.
Amazing. Going on with the academic theme a little bit, Flip, I know you touched on earlier about obviously doing the executive MBA and that really being a factor to how you wanted to kind of move your career and your business forward. How how is it? I mean, it's probably a bit soon to say, but how do you feel like it's impacted and aided your career in the business world so far?
Yeah, also very good question. I think the executive MBA in particular, if to get how I made a choice on that is, we are getting, I'm already 36 this year, so it was a big decision about going full on MBA. As I touched a little bit on those transferable skills, we worked in teams and leadership, and I had a undergrad in finance and economics, and how do you mix that whole ball and use it in business afterwards. And the executive MBA, was perfect in that sense that it helps me build further on those frameworks that I can use afterwards and currently can use. Excuse me. Where we are able to, we have 1 week of class and then immediately you can apply it in your business. As James will tell you as well, we just finished a good old slog of 12 hours of Zoom sessions today, and it's very interesting and very tiring, very challenging. And coming to the judge, it's exactly the thing you wanted. You didn't want to, as James Cracknell said earlier, you didn't want the same undergrad experience where, because you were a sports star, you were carried on feathers and they made sure that you passed your exams. We wrote the Thursday or the Thursday after the Varsity match, we wrote a management practice exam at 8 a.m, which was a very good experience. And it's exactly that what you said. Previously in rugby, you were spoon fed, and you knew how easy life was, and it was easy to moan about, things are not going right, and my bed's uncomfortable, I can't get a good night's sleep. And then when you get out of the real world, and you see what all the boys around you and your new team and your new teammates have to go through, you just have to pull up your socks and adapt to that.
Yeah, it's pretty. You make it sound pretty intense, and I mean, to add another layer of intensity to that, James Horwell, I'm correct, you've got 2 young daughters, don't you? And obviously I think you weren't living in Cambridge, you were living in London and sort of commuting up and doing the sports and doing the executive MBA and being dad to 2 little girls. That must have been a next level challenge.
I got one little girl. I got another baby on the way. So my wife's pregnant at the moment. But yeah, look, we it certainly was a challenge in sort of, I think Flip and James have both touched on it, that when you're a professional athlete, you do get spoon fed and things are sorted for you. You almost get told where you need to be, when you need to be there, and you just need to almost show up. And I think from coming out of a professional environment, you have to be pretty organized. And I think the family element, adds an extra mix to that, having a young daughter and prioritizing them and making sure that they're okay and your wife's okay, while also understanding your study requirements, and then also your training requirements when, in the lead up to the varsity match. So I think it's just it is a challenge, and I think it is something different, playing 15 years of professional sports, whereas I said you sort of spoon fed a little bit in the way that you go about things. It's it's about learning, and it's certainly an experience that I enjoyed, and look, it's something that I think it'll add to hopefully benefit my my career moving forward. But I think it's a unique experience, and that's as James touched on. It is a unique experience, and you do respect the guys that you play with, particularly we in our rugby team we had a lot of guys that doing doctors and astrophysicists and all these sort of amazing things that you wouldn't even ever be exposed to at a rugby club or a professional rugby environment. And I think it's quite special and quite unique is probably the best way to put the sort of the rugby club at the university, or sport at the university, is that I guess the brain power of some of the guys that you play with is quite astronomical.
Yeah, I mean James points out something that was very interesting. And we used to have a half-hour minibus drive back from the boathouse every day, and conversations in there were unlike any. Some were the same, but they're unlike, many were unlike anything you'd have in a normal bus on the way back for a training venue.
Yeah.
It was interesting that Super Bowl was last weekend, and I was driving the bus, and I was reading some stat about how much guacamole was going to be eaten on Super Bowl Sunday, and it would fill the stadium half full. If the whole Americans ate that much guacamole during the game, and someone goes, how many tubs of guacamole is that? And then it got fired around the bus. Okay, how do you work out the volume of a sphere? And it was, rather than in any other bus I've been in, then someone would guess some number. They said they'd worked out the volume. They'd worked out, basically someone had phoned their mum to work out if an avocado would float or sink, to then work out how much weight would then be in the tubs. And I was like, okay, they're quite clever, this lot. This isn't what. And then weirdly, we then stop at a petrol station, and I go, can you just shove some diesel in there? And he couldn't work out that to open the petrol can, you had to open the passenger's door. And it took him 5 minutes. I just sat there watching him going, well, what is this? And I go, are you struggling there? And he goes, I can't work out how to open it. And I go, what are you doing? I'm doing a PhD in engineering. And I was like, you're just so clever. That's really not that good.
Yeah, I've got a very similar story about someone asking me how to post a letter of one of my rugby players. I won't name names, but they didn't know how to post a letter in any way, shape, or form. But doing some, as you said, some ridiculous PhD in astrophysics or whatever it is. So yeah, I can relate to that, certainly.
I think if anyone ever asks me, what's it like actually, going to Cambridge, I bet everyone's really clever. I just want to give that kind of those anecdotes as an answer, because it is something else sometimes. You become a bit numb to it after a while. But
the other thing about, so James posting a letter there, it's the difference that I found was that it's your responsibility to be somewhere. It's so easy not to go to lectures and to miss things, rather than having been a full-time athlete when you're told to be there, take this with you, you'll get picked up there. So then you've got to find out when your lectures are, what you're doing, what you need. When I was a full-time athlete, our national funding came in during my time as being an athlete. So we're a professional, we had sort of subsistence grants, and going from having a job and training to having no job, that I missed actually not doing anything. And I remember I thought I'd hit the real low when my to-do list for that day was shave and post letter.
That's excellent. I mean, if you shaved and you posted a letter, at least you've left your house. At least you've left your room, which was more that I can say about my room in college the past 4 days. So James Cracknell, back onto your sort of that sort of student experience that you had, and that dynamic in the training squad in the rowing club. There was a lot of the media coverage about the boat race when you were partaking. Like, you Google, James Cracknell boat race, and it would come up with, oh, he's the oldest competitor ever. And it was very focused on your age. Did you find that a little bit annoying and a little bit tedious, or was it more of a badge of honour for you, kind of amongst the squad and within your sense of personal accomplishment?
In sense of personal accomplishment, I would say making the boat ranked as highly as anything I've done, because I hadn't raced for 15 years, and I wasn't the first name on the sheet by any stretch of the imagination. And and the reality is that I left at one level, and the sport moves on, and you don't move on with it. And so I had to fight really hard to get into it. I think managing to dig myself out of a pretty big hole and make the boat was personally satisfying. I felt bad for the other guys that so much focus was on me being in it, rather than on the guys that deserved it. There's a few of them are training for the Olympics in their various countries right now, and so I felt there was too much focus on me. But at the same time, the Oxford didn't know that I wasn't the strongest in the boat. They're still racing my record rather than the other guys had seen. And what I liked about it most was that you come into your teammates treat you as you are rather than they don't treat you as a what medals you got in your locker. What you have is the one you haven't got, and that's the one you're all chasing together. So I sort of, my only regret is that the attention was taken away from them a bit. But I think what I was able to bring, may not be able to bring my old physical stuff, but I'm sure James and Flip will say the same, is that I think there's an element of being streetwise that's quite useful in a competitive environment. And some of my mates that from rugby I was competing around the era when we won the Rugby World Cup, and a few of them carried on afterwards, and even though they were getting slightly older, they would say, well, the more tired I get, the more I shout at everyone else. And that generally was my policy as well.
I'm really interested by what you say there about the attitudes to you, both within your own boat and like the opposition attitudes. Because to go back to the rugby issue, Edward got in touch with us on Twitter today to talk about how he used to, as a 19-year-old skinny kid, he used to hate coming to Cambridge to play against the pro second rows. And from the outside looking in, it does seem a bit like you've got these two massive pro athletes. They're on the S&C in professional clubs, and they've come straight into a student environment. And there is an aspect there of some poor undergrads here are being thrown to the lions a bit. Does that slightly exaggerate I'll go to you on this one, Flip. Does that slightly exaggerate your experience of playing against students?
I think it does. I think with the modern day S&C, it was more me and James being scared of the 19-year-old flying around and running everywhere, and we having to keep up. Than the other way around. We definitely in preparation for the Varsity match. We had a couple of very, very tough encounters, especially the Bodgers match just the week before the Varsity match. You had young guys and older guys trying to break every bone you have in your body, and coming out of 15 years of professional sport, we were both pretty much broken already, and just trying to keep up. But yeah, trying to touch on Cracknell's point there, that chasing that blues jacket, that's the ultimate goal from day one when you arrive. And by no means you are on that Varsity match list. There's a whole selection process that goes through, and you have to get through all those matches, and you have to make sure you're in top form. And you have to make sure that you can contribute to the other guys in the team to make sure they realize their dream of winning this match. Because we might have played in World Cups and Super Rugby finals and all those kind of things, but we've never played in a Varsity match. And there's only a few people being able to say that, and there's only a few blues jackets going around. So it stays a very special event, and it stays an awesome journey. It's a team when we came on, and it became your family. It became the guys that you went first to when you had questions. Like the guys asking James how to post letter. He was a dad in the team.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about that, James Horwell, because obviously Flip mentions their contributions on the pitch, and I think anybody who watched Cambridge play throughout the season, or if they only watched the Varsity match, it's quite clear what you guys brought. I mean, your professional experience led to set piece dominance and a lot of collision dominance around the fringes and things like that. But off the pitch, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you saw your role with that group of players.
Yeah, look, I think it's, touching a little bit on what Flip said, the important part, I guess, about rugby is it's a sport that no one person is going to be able to win it on his own, or two people will be able to do it. It is truly a team aspect. And I think that's something that's really great about the sport of rugby as a whole. And for us to be able to help, and that's what we felt. We tried to help as much as we could the guys achieve you realize how important it is to these guys when you're playing, that how the importance of what it meant to win a varsity, and Flip talks about getting the blues jacket when you get presented it just before you play, but it was always about getting a winning blue, and we hadn't had the most success previously. So the pressure in that sense was about us helping the team win, because I know how much it meant, not only to us, but particularly to the guys that have been there for a long time, particularly last year's varsity, so 2019's varsity, that there was a lot of guys leaving that had been there, so 3, 4, 5 years, and they wanted to leave on a note that they could remember, and that was important to us to try and allow, assist them, and by doing that, it gives you a very rich sense of gratification about helping other people achieve what they wanted to do, while you're sort of ticking a box that that you've had marked down that you wanted to win a varsity match as well. And I think when you touch on off the field, I was probably a bit of the father figure. I think I was the only dad in the team, but I was probably old enough to be some of their dads if anything. But look, it's about, I think the thing for me is that they was probably trying to play that calming influence a little bit for both Flip and I, because it is, you can see as we got closer to the varsity match, there was felt like a lot of tension, a lot of stress about these little things, and it was more about trying to allow guys to sort of relax and just sort of go through it, not so stressed and uptight that you're not going to be able to play the game, because we have some great young players in our team, and some guys that will, I think, could have a future in playing professionally. And I think it was about sort of allowing them to give that belief, and if we were able to do that, that was probably a big thing that Flip and I were trying to do. So I think it's that was probably the main thing, particularly leading up to the varsity. There was a couple of sessions where we probably got a little bit anxious. You could tell the guys were stressed, and it was all becoming it was a big opportunity, and it is a big event. You're playing at Twickenham, which is an amazing stadium. It was probably a shame about the weather this year, where it was pouring with rain, so it probably impacted the fan numbers. But it is, again, it's live on TV. It might be the only chance that some of these guys get to play at a stadium like that. So you want to make it memorable. And we were, I feel as happy to make the scenes in the change room afterwards, where you can see the pure joy on these guys' faces was, what made it memorable to me.
And just on that issue of making it memorable for these guys, who, for many of them, this is the pinnacle of their sporting career. We know the boat race is supposed to be happening soon on April the 4th, but I guess let's go back to you, Flip. How disappointing will it be if the varsity match doesn't go ahead? Because there's nothing concrete, as far as I know, unless you've got something else to tell us. But as far as I know, there's nothing concrete in play yet.
Yeah. I don't know if we don't have any great news. Unfortunately, there's some talks that they want to have a version of the varsity match. Whether it will be full contact rugby or not, that is the big question. And yeah, I think we're not going to be the only guys who says we missed it. We basically just missed getting out and kicking the ball around and rubbing someone else's face in the dirt a little bit. That was something that was part of our lives for very, very, very long, and suddenly it's gone. And I think it would definitely be a shame, but you have to see it in a context of a lot of things. It's not the worst thing that can happen. I think the biggest thing that I can say it's missing is having that cohesion and having training with a team and having people around you that support you. I think that's the beauty of sport, and that's why we all can be here tonight, because sports create that community. No matter what sport you do, if you're a tennis player or if you're rowing, there's a team around you. There's a little supporting ecosystem around you, and that's what makes sports beautiful.
Nathan touched obviously a little bit on the restrictions due to COVID. It's impossible to get through an interview without talking about it. It's the elephant in the room, really. James Cracknell, let's just go to you on this one. Obviously, the indoor championships rowing are meant to be coming up at the end of this month, I believe. But obviously that alters the nature of the sport itself. You're not in a boat as a crew. Do you think that is going to have some sort of lasting impact on the sport, or are people still holding out for the boat race this year?
Well, no, I think the boat race, last year's boat race was, sport start what, March 23rd, so it's sort of 2 weeks away from happening, and it'll be, I missed one Olympics. I got tonsillitis on the day of the opening ceremony in Atlanta, so I trained for 4 years and missed it. But there's always the next Olympics and the next Olympics. Whereas, as Flip was touching on, that if you're in your last year at university and the boat race doesn't happen or the varsity match doesn't happen, you've gone. That's it. You could join another course, but you move on with your life. So you've lost that window, and that's going to have a real knock-on effect. I think it's really difficult to train for an event that you don't know whether it's going to happen or not, and that's the same with the guys and girls that are training to get ready for Tokyo, if it's going to happen, if it's not going to happen. And it's difficult for the coaching staff to set a program, and as the guys are touching on, that you're training with your mates and people you trust, but it's, especially rowing, you just got to do those horrible sessions on the rowing machine. You're the one that's putting your hand in the flame, and if no one else is there to watch you, you may back off on some of those sessions, and ultimately that's going to cost you in the race. So I think it will be a disaster if the race doesn't happen. I think for me, it wouldn't have mattered if the crowds are there or not, because there is going to happen. There's going to be no crowds, but you're still racing one boat, and yes, there's not lots of people watching the Olympics, which is very nice, but the biggest pleasure is winning rather than people watching. So I think it'd be a real shame for the guys and the girls who've put in so much effort alongside studying, and also, not so much this year, but the year I was there, is that you're cutting out on your social life as well, and basically you're just kind of rowing, doing academic work, and then you sort of think, okay, I'll have some fun in the summer term, but then that's catching up on the work you missed in the first 2 terms. So it's a big commitment, and I think for guys to go there at 18, 19, 20, I wouldn't have made the most of the sport, the social life, or the academics. I'd have ended up probably doing badly at all 3. So I think it's a real shame they've made the commitment to not see it through. And in terms of what the guys saying about the talent in the team, that the thing that I was surprised at is that they sort of don't always have the belief in how good they are, because they're juggling. They're phenomenally intelligent, and they're also really good at sport, and they just kind of think, well, actually, he's got a good picture. No, you are this good. You have got a career in this if you want it, but also you can go and be an amazing architect. You can go and be a doctor. All the other things they're doing. So part of the thing I enjoyed most was actually just seeing their confidence in themselves grow over the year. And then the good thing about the boat race is that there's no heat, there's no semi-final, it's bang, straight in it. And if you get it wrong on that day, the previous 6 months have been wasted. And that's what makes racing it hard, what makes coaching it hard, because there's no practice. You've got to hit the ground running. It's not like a tournament where you play a pool match, then quarter, semis, final. You've got to get it right on that one day, or you're lost.
Yeah, we've Nathan and I we've heard various whispers about the boat race this year. Obviously Nathan spoke to Tom's Ransley last month, that both, obviously you touched on the crowd aspect, but it's one thing going from a limited amount of training straight into a boat race. I think, as far as I'm aware, both camps are kind of in favour for having 6 weeks proper training before a boat race would go ahead this year. Could you shed any light on that, or are we going to have to stay waiting a bit longer?
I don't know whether I can shed any light on it. There definitely won't be any crowds there. I've spoken to the BBC about the coverage we're planning is going to go ahead, but I can pretty much guarantee that if both universities were told, right, there's no practice, you train on your own, and then you come together and race on that day. You know, first time you've been in the boat together is on the way to the start. I would take that over no racing. And you know, just back yourself that you're going to do it, and just do your training right on your own, and then back your skills on the day. I'd much rather have that than not race at all.
No, I think a lot of people will probably be sharing your opinion on that. Any sport is good sport at this stage in the game, I think. But obviously there's been a great amount of sacrifice and extra effort to get that sport to happen at the moment. And it was particularly apparent to me, Kev, in the kind of professional rugby game. Over the Christmas holidays, I was doing some coverage with Gloucester Tigers out in the West Country, and I wasn't even allowed 20 metres, you know, side of the pitch. I had to be so far away from the players to just do my job. Is that something that you're glad you're not having to deal with at the moment? Or would you just, you know, any rugby's rugby, like James was saying with rowing, or actually is some stress just a bit too much?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, I've still got a lot of friends that are playing professional rugby in that sense, and it's I think without the fans is probably not as, you know, particularly a sport like rugby that's very emotive. You know, there's a lot of passion shown by players, and it is quite an emotional game because you need to get up. It's a very physical, confrontational game, so you need to, you know, emotion plays a big part in the result. And you know, talking to a lot of guys that are playing in front of empty stands, just say it's not the same. You know, I watch some of the pro rugby now and sort of sometimes think, thank God I'm not playing that anymore, because I think my body's sore enough when I wake up out of bed. I remember how sore it used to get trying to get out of bed on a Sunday morning after a Saturday match. But yeah, look, it's great. I think, you know, as a fan for me now to watch, because it changes up what I can actually sort of dissect what my weekend is to my weekday, because there's actually rugby on that I can watch. Other than that, you know, most days are the same. But look, I think the situation, you know, I'd love to see community rugby get back out there, but in the nature of the sport that it is, it's, you know, it's close contact. It's probably the worst thing for what COVID, you know, people say that COVID in spreading the, you know, disease, it's in close contact. You're touching a lot of different people all the time, and you know, it's a contact sport. So, you know, it's such a difficult one, because you know, there's a bigger picture here than just sport, but obviously sport plays such an important part of you know, British culture. You know, I've lived here now for 6 years, but particularly, you know, where I'm from, Australia, you know, Australian culture, it just wouldn't be the same without sport. So I always sort of think back of what Australia would be like if people weren't be allowed to play community sports. It's, you know, it's the lifeblood of almost our country. And I think it's such an important thing. So the sooner we can get sport, professional level sport back, particularly rugby in my sense, but any level sport back, I think the sooner we can do that, the better, just for people's well-being. You know, we understand what it does from a physical point of view, but also a mental point of view, to just get people out there exercising. And I think it's a really important part, and hopefully we can, you know, in this country, we can get things moving sooner rather than later.
James, I don't know if you watched I watched the Ireland-Wales game at the weekend.
Yeah.
And what I found strange was the anthems, that they were socially distancing in the anthems. I'm thinking, in about a minute, you're going to have your head where the sun don't shine next to him. You can probably stand a bit closer.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. And in the Premiership over here, you're not allowed to celebrate face to face, which I mean, like they score a maul try where there's like 16 bodies all touching each other, but then he scores, you're not allowed to actually touch him. So, yeah, I think there's probably, you know, box ticking in terms of what looks good. So then everyone standing there arm in arm might not look that good. But yeah, I'm with you on that, mate. It's I thought that was very weird. And then the whole no celebration thing, it just sort of doesn't make sense to me. But they got to do what they got to do.
Philip, in the spirit of talking about the importance of sport to the community, obviously as our Springbok, you're the resident expert here. It looks like the Lions Tour if it goes ahead, is not going to take place in South Africa this summer, at least according to the rumours. How much of a blow is that to both South African rugby and the people of South Africa?
Yeah, mate, I do hope that is a very big rumor. And I obviously see that being spread around in the UK papers, and hopefully, you know, obviously they're pushing to get it on home soil. That is what's happening. I think, you know, the Lions tour is something very unique. You know, you as a country, you only get to play the Lions once every 12 years. Being, you know, preparing for that and having it in front of your home crowd is definitely something you need. It's definitely something you need is also the crowd traveling to come watch. I think that's part of the big experience, and it would be a great shame if especially in a South African context, a country that needs a bit of investment, a bit of foreign investment, a bit of exposure, a bit of tourism, could pick up the economical situation at the moment. Although it'd be a little bit just the exposure on TV and sponsorships and etc. That would be a big thing. And I hope, you know, for me it would be better, you know, push it out 1 year rather than play it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because what I've read or heard, at least, and again, obviously, like you said, this might just be UK papers peddling a certain narrative. The idea of pushing it back a year seems to be a non-negotiable for the unions because of its proximity to the 2023 World Cup. James Horwell, you obviously played against the Lions in 2013. You captained against them. One of the defining images for me was following the second test. You're in Melbourne. You're there crying your eyes out. So you definitely know all about the importance of the Lions tour. Is that fair enough? Like that logic that it can't be a year out from a World Cup? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, look, I'll back up what Flip said. The importance of the Lions, you know, while, you know, living over here in the UK, I appreciate how big it's been. I was here when the New Zealand one went, and it is huge. The importance to the nations that they visit is big. It's once every 12 years. I think only in Australia we've only had one player play against the Lions twice. So it's literally, you've got one shot in your career to play against them, and if it falls in that window, you're lucky enough to be there. You know, it's a huge occasion. You know, we had 30,000 British and Irish fans come down to Australia, and it, you know, the whole 6 weeks they were out there was as good an experience I've had with rugby, you know, anywhere in the world, with the support that they generate for their team. Not only the test matches, but the provincial matches are probably some great memories for me. But look, I think the rugby calendar at the moment is very congested. Now, rightly or wrongly, from a purely rugby sense, that it's very cyclical. It's every 4 years, and the importance is put on the World Cup. Now, I don't know if that's the right thing. You know, teams plan for a World Cup 4 years out, so they start blooding new players and trying to get people, you know, which we're seeing now in the Six Nations, to prepare for the World Cup so they can try and peak then. Now, yeah, from what I've heard, I've heard the same from you, is that they're talking about it not being able to be pushed for whatever reason that is, due to the home unions, with the stress that it puts on the players, particularly up here with the Premiership. You know, you play a full season, then they go straight into a Lions series, which gives, you know, they get a month lead in. I think last time they played the final, and then they're on the plane on the Monday. They were gone for 8 weeks, came back, had 3 weeks off, and then started again. And the rate of injury for players after a Lions series, I read some stats. There's a higher chance of serious injury, so, you know, being out for longer than a couple of weeks post a Lions series than there are, you know, with a normal lead in. And I think that's what's probably spooking the home unions. If they get, you know, an England have a Maro Itoje, unfortunately goes on the delay, it goes on Lions series, and then blows his knee out after the Lions series, misses the World Cup lead in. You know, that'll have a big impact on the way they perform at the World Cup.
It's interesting how the thinking back to 2003 and what we did is that the guys felt that a big part of them win the World Cup was when they beat New Zealand at home, when the All Blacks were, and they're down to 13 and held the All Blacks out and beat them down there. That gave them the confidence that, right, we can beat the Southern Hemisphere teams on their own. And I imagine part of their concern is that with the 4 home nations preparing for a Lions tour, it gives the All Blacks and the Aussies extra time to focus on their teams, and it actually handicaps the Northern Hemisphere teams more, apart from the French, but no one likes them anyway.
Yeah, I mean that. I think the amount of stakeholders involved in professional rugby now, with all the different leagues, you know, as you said, you've got the French league, the Premiership, the Pro 14, the Southern Hemisphere leagues. You know, everyone needs to sort of be on the same page, and everyone's sort of, you know, after COVID, probably worrying about their own backyard a little bit now that they've had no fans, so the revenues are down. But yeah, look, I'd like to see it go ahead properly. You know, particularly for South Africa. You know, we were lucky enough to tour South Africa with you know, playing with the Reds and Australia, and it's a fantastic country and they love their rugby. And it would be a real shame that if it didn't go ahead in South Africa. So I think hopefully it can, and hopefully with fans, but I don't know when that's going to be, and smarter people than me are going to be able to make that call.
It's funny you say no one, you don't like, no one likes the French. I'm pretty sure Flip likes them after quite a bit of time.
I don't know if he does actually.
Yeah, well, could be critical, but they're doing very well at the moment.
Okay. They're doing very well.
Yeah.
Flip, I'll come to you for the next question, and this is quite an important topic, and it's our own fault here for maybe losing track of time a little bit. So I hope we don't get cut off. But James Horwell spoke about injuries there, and alongside the Lions, the other big piece of news, not just in rugby but in the sporting world, has been the Steve Thompson lawsuit against I think, I can't remember if it's against World Rugby or the RFU, but either way, because of injuries that he sustained to his head over the course of his career, and the very unfortunate revelation that he can't remember winning a World Cup. Obviously, you're in the same environment. Are you at all concerned for your own safety, or do you think that you played in a later era that was much more safety conscious about the head?
Look, it is it's a great topic and a great topic of discussion, and I think history has told us, you know, with studies being done in the NFL, that it is a topic that we have to be aware of. And I myself did have a couple of injuries in my life, which you know make you realize how, you know, how sensitive your head is and how easy you get injured, and how, you know, it's a very important topic, and you know, who's right and who's wrong, I don't want to get into that. And I'm happy that they're raising awareness, especially for the younger players playing now, and taking care and making sure safety is of importance. Again, you know, you don't want to get into a political tug of war saying, you know, this needs to be done and that needs to be done, and people need to be shutted out, you know, not to talk too much. You know, you want the discussion to happen, and you want people to be taken care of. I think that is the most important thing. I want to give some time to James as well to address. Yeah.
No, I would just add to what Flip is. I think that the strides that the game has made from when I started playing professionally to what it was when I finished, which was 2019, and even further now, is, you know, the difference is quite stark. The acknowledgement and the understanding, like, you know, I think the head is something that we don't have a full understanding of completely of what the effects are, but acknowledging that there's some parameters in place, I think, has been really important, and they've been brought in and becoming stricter and stricter. And I think the important thing is a lot of it has been taken out of the players' hands, because as a professional athlete or as a competitive person, you want to play all the time, and that's what you want to do. It's ingrained in you, rightly or wrongly. And I think the important thing is taking it out of the players' hands and saying, no, these are the parameters. If you don't hit them, or if we make a call, we override your decision, and that's final. And I think that's the most important thing. But as Flip said, we're still learning about it. And look, something that I think the game is going in the right way, but there's still plenty to learn and plenty to understand.
Thank you, James. And James Cracknell, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier on in the chat about the accident that you suffered when you were cycling across America. And you've done some amazing work on advocacy for wearing bike helmets and raising awareness about brain injury. Within that debate within sport, how do you feel on how it's kind of spoken about, and do you think it really needs to be addressed wider within the media and sporting culture?
Well, I think that the guys touched on it. I think that if you ask a player in any sport with an injury, are you okay to carry on? They're going to go, yeah, because first and foremost, they're competitive, so it does need to be taken out of their hands. And I think that's where the governing bodies need to almost have it taken away from their hands, because the questions are whether they're putting, or the clubs, they're putting the players at risk. But I don't know enough about those sorts of sports. I think it's, you touched on cycling helmets, and Australia have had it. You have to, it's law to wear a cycling helmet there. It's not here, and there's questions, should you make it legal or not? I know from my experience that if I hadn't been wearing a bike helmet, I'd have been dead, because the fuel truck's windmill hit the back of my helmet, and without that, it would have killed me. And people, we still only have a 30% rate of people wearing them, and a lot of the reason why people don't is that it's freedom of choice. I don't care what happens to me. I don't want to wear one, and all I know is that my parents got the call saying, you've got to come over to America. We don't know what's going to happen over the next 24 hours. Is that you may not care about yourself, but there are a hell of a lot of people who care about you. And just take COVID as a fine example, in that there's been we horribly 100,000 deaths in this country a couple of weeks ago, and for every one person's died, there's 9 significant others that are hugely affected and haven't been able to say goodbye, mourn, go to a funeral. And so that's 1 million people, not 100,000. And that's the same if you have a head injury. It's not just you that gets affected, it's your family, it's your friends, it's your work colleagues, it's your kids, it's your dad. So it needs to be taken out of the players' hands and out of the governing body's hands, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting you say. You all touched on out of the players' hands. I mean, I was obviously watching the Ireland-Wales game on the weekend. If my accent didn't give it away, I'm a big Ireland fan, and seeing Johnny Sexton's reaction to being told he had to come off was, people laughed at it, but at the same time, it's not something to laugh at. His anger and annoyance there, it doesn't matter that he's annoyed. He needed to be taken off after getting whacked in the head there. So you're right. And it's interesting seeing that you say it needs to be taken out of governing bodies' hands as well. I suppose that's why we have, say in rugby, we've got the independent doctors who do the head injury assessments. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. Those are some really important points there. And hopefully this conversation about the head in all sport, not just rugby, continues. To end on somewhat of a lighter note, Flip, I'm going to come to you here because you have some experience with this. I'm sure many of us saw the viral clip from the French Pro D2 a couple of weeks ago of the Fijian player getting sent off for lifting up the referee. He got banned for 6 weeks for that, but you only got banned 4 weeks for pushing a referee out of the way. What's going on there?
Yeah, referees are a bit sensitive, especially in France, even more. No, I'm joking. There needs to stay that respect level between a player and a referee. And then, surely the guy got a little bit excited. If he just chose the guy next to him, I think he saw it was a prop, so he didn't want to risk trying to pick him up. You have to agree with the punishment. There needs to be a level of respect to senior players, and we don't want anyone, going around high-fiving referees and doing whatever they want. So it's probably the right choice.
6 weeks, that seemed a little bit excessive. I remember seeing your one, and I thought 4 weeks was excessive.
Yeah.
Lack of consistency. Which is worse, pushing a referee or lifting up in the air? Anyway, another conversation for another day. That is all we have time for, unfortunately. That hour just absolutely flew by, but some really good stuff there, guys. On behalf of myself and Charlotte, thank you to James Horwell, Flip van der Merwe, and James Cracknell for joining us tonight and having a really good chat about professional sport and the varsity match at Oxbridge, as well as a host of other very important topics. Thank you also to the Cambridge Union for allowing myself and Charlotte to host tonight. We are not usual union hosts. We are from the Cambridge Bluebird, which is your one stop for all things Cambridge University sport. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
guys.
much, guys. GDBO.
GDBO indeed.